Deep web or the dark web is a place surrounded by many stories and myths. The dark web is a hidden world on the internet, consisting of sites that cannot be accessed through search engines or regular browsers. You need a special browser called Tor to enter it. Websites on the dark web are considered difficult to trace, and their owners cannot be easily identified, nor can you know who manages them or what data they contain. Everything is encrypted, with complex encryption. Is it a hidden place? The dark web attracts the worst of people, where forbidden things happen: hackers, killers, deviants, drug and weapon dealers. Today our story is about a young man who built the most dangerous website on the dark web, and the FBI pursued him for a long time. What is this website? And how did this young man create it and continue to manage it discreetly without his family or close friends knowing? This story is very intense, talking about the dark web, FBI investigations, traitorous and corrupt agents, hiring professional killers, betrayal, unbelievable plots. Brace yourselves and be careful what you digest. Our story today is of heavyweight caliber. Peace be upon you. Our story today is about a young man named Ross Ulbricht. Ross, who grew up in the state of Texas, USA. He studied physics at the university and lived in a loving family, and everyone around him, relatives and friends, thought he was a nice and kind young man living his life away from troubles. Imagine the shock they had later when they found out about his hidden life, that behind their backs, he was running the most dangerous site on the dark web. But let's not jump ahead of events. First, let's find out what led Ross to this dark world. It all began after Ross graduated from university. He tried to enter the world of commerce and business, but his projects did not succeed, and he faced failure repeatedly for years. Ross had a crazy idea, a concept he knew would succeed, but the problem lay in its implementation. This idea was to build a website that functions as a large online store. The store would sell everything without any limits or laws. Do you have something you want to sell? Come and sell it, especially drugs. However, Ross didn't adopt the idea solely to make money and become rich. This idea was deeply rooted in his beliefs and principles. He believed in complete freedom and that the government shouldn't prohibit drugs. At times, he engaged in debates with close people like friends, stating that it's his body, and he should be free to decide what to do with it. Why should the government intervene? When people countered him, saying that drugs are harmful to individuals and society, he would respond by questioning why alcohol or fast food isn't banned. These things also have a very negative impact according to his thinking. The forbidden and drugs, in his view, should be available, and individuals should have the choice to use them or not. So, the idea of the website aligned with his principles. But unfortunately, if he implemented it immediately, he would be caught and imprisoned. Ross discovered the world of the dark web and knew that the sites within it were challenging to trace back to their owners or obtain their data. A hidden world far from the eyes of authorities and the government, a place that would protect his identity and the identity of his customers. However, even with this hidden internet world, there was another problem: the issue of payment. There was no electronic payment method that the government could trace. This was the biggest obstacle for Ross, and it kept him postponing the idea for a long time. But in the year 2010, a new technology began to spread worldwide. The technology called blockchain. From this technology emerged a digital currency that would change the world, namely Bitcoin. Of course, today we are familiar with Bitcoin and digital currencies, but at that time, it was something new. The beginnings were in 2009 and 2010 when Ross first heard about Bitcoin. He knew that finally, he would be able to create the website he had been dreaming of for a long time, because Bitcoin was an electronic payment method impossible to trace, a decentralized currency that no one controlled. Immediately after learning about Bitcoin, Ross started working on this website from his bedroom. He decided to name the website Silk Road, which in Arabic means the Silk Road. Of course, the Silk Road is named after an ancient trade route that existed for 2,000 years, stretching from China to Europe. Ross was extremely cautious while building this website. He didn't want anyone to know who was behind it, so he had to build everything himself and couldn't hire anyone to help. The only person Ross informed about the website was his girlfriend, Julia. Julia was very apprehensive about the matter, but Ross assured her that thanks to the Tor browser, the dark web, and the blockchain technology used by Bitcoin, everything would be hidden and no one would be able to track them. Of course, working on the website was not easy at all. Ross initially had no experience in designing and building websites. He spent hundreds of hours learning design and programming, facing many problems along the way. However, he was determined to bring his idea to life and continued to work day and night to solve all the challenges that arose. Finally, a functioning version of the website was created and acceptable by the beginning of 2011. Ross was a fan of the TV series Breaking Bad, where the main character, Walter White, lives under a rock and doesn't know who Breaking Bad is. The series about a person named Walter, a chemistry professor suffering from cancer and lacking funds to leave for his family. He becomes afraid of dying and leaving his family with nothing. Walter then uses his knowledge and chemistry skills to produce high-quality methamphetamine, ultimately transforming into one of the biggest drug dealers. The irony is that Ross followed the same path as his favorite character, but the difference was that he was doing it in reality. After Ross successfully tested the website, he knew he needed merchandise to offer. He had to be the first merchant to sell on the seat, so he rented a small warehouse in an isolated location and set up a farm for magic mushrooms. The effect of these mushrooms is similar to cannabis, making them the first product to be sold on Silk Road. Now the next step was to market the website. The problem was that the site existed on the dark web, a hidden place not visible in search engines, and traditional advertisements like Google or Facebook were not an option. Ross came up with a second strategy. He went to forums dedicated to discussions about drugs and cannabis-related topics, cleverly posting about Silk Road. Instead of outright stating that he created a drug website, he wrote things like, "Hey guys, I came across a site called Silk Road on the web. It claims to sell drugs discreetly. Here's the link. What do you think? Should I buy from it?" He presented it as if he were a potential customer seeking advice from the community. He knew people would naturally check the site and share their thoughts, and this became his marketing strategy. Indeed, the approach succeeded, yielding results. People began to visit the site, orders started pouring in, and customers paid with Bitcoin, providing their desired delivery address. The question arose: how would Ross ship the orders? For the first step, he vacuumed the mushrooms in food bags, sucked the air out, sealed the bags tightly, and then placed them in a strong envelope, adding labels, postage stamps, and so on. He sent the package to the provided address. Sometimes he would send the order inside a book or a DVD case, disguising it as a regular mail parcel. Certainly, customers didn't provide their real names or addresses. They used addresses they could receive items at without revealing their identities, such as the addresses of friends or relatives. This was even emphasized as advice on the site by Ross himself, warning people not to use their real addresses or identities when placing orders. On this note, orders continued to increase rapidly to the point where Ross started shipping on a daily basis. However, what had an impact was the emergence of others offering their goods on the site. The site began showcasing various types and forms of drugs, attracting even more customers. Ross took a 6% commission from each sale transaction on the site. As time passed, and with the increase in orders and product variety, Ross decided to stop the mushroom sales and focus all his attention on managing the site and addressing its problems. The site faced numerous challenges, and one of the crucial issues was trust. Since sellers and buyers were anonymous, Ross implemented a system that allowed customers to rate and review sellers, and vice versa. This system enhanced trust among users, as it provided a way for both buyers and sellers to evaluate each other's reliability. Certainly, running the website was extremely challenging for Ross. As we mentioned, he was a self-taught individual with no professional programming or web design experience. It took significant time and effort for him to solve any problem he encountered. Despite the difficulties, he was dedicated, working day and night because he could clearly see the tremendous growth happening. The site was attracting tens of thousands of users within just a few months. Ross was at the height of his excitement about this rapid growth. But there was another person who wasn't as enthusiastic: his girlfriend, Julia. Julia was afraid of the increasing number of orders, especially as the site started dealing with stronger drugs. The website was now selling drugs that could be lethal, such as heroin. She would occasionally ask Ross about potential risks, like what would happen if someone took an overdose or if a seller manipulated the drugs or mixed them with dangerous substances. Ross responded confidently, stating that the rating system would catch any bad behavior. If a dealer sold bad drugs, they would receive a negative rating and no one would buy from them again. Julia pointed out that this might not prevent harm if someone was already dead from the beginning. Ross struggled to respond and tried to reassure her, saying that it wouldn't happen. He then continued with his work. The site was growing rapidly through word of mouth, but the staggering growth occurred when the media started talking about it. The website became a topic in newspapers, articles, and even on television news channels. The media coverage brought even more attention to Silk Road, contributing to its exponential growth. And of course, this thing attracted more users and customers. But after catching the attention of the authorities and the FBI, the site continued to grow insanely. It was under intense pressure because he managed everything on his own. Any normal website, when it grows and expands, hires more people to work on it. But Silk Road was not a normal site. One day, he woke up and found something new offered on the site, something he never expected. Someone was offering a gun for sale. Although this was surprising at first, he sat down and thought as usual, meaning weapons are already widespread everywhere in America, so what's the problem if they are sold on a site after all? But again, his girlfriend Julia objected and asked him to think. Why would someone want to buy a gun secretly and illegally? What do you expect? Will they use it for good? Will they plant flowers? Another argument ensued between them, and in the end, Julia left the house and went to her friend Erica, whose name he mentioned. When Erica saw her, she was upset and asked, "What's going on?" In the end, Julia told her the story, but after informing her, she immediately felt regret, and Erica promised not to tell anyone about what she had said. Erica told her, "I won't speak, believe me, I won't speak." And indeed, for a while it seemed that Erica would keep her promise. However, one day when Ross logged into Facebook, he was surprised by a post from Erica stating, "I'm sure the authorities would like to know about the drug site run by Ross Ulbricht." When Ross first saw the post, he was shocked and felt an unusual sense of fear that took over his entire body. Quickly, he went to Julia and showed her Erica's tweet, asking her in a frustrated tone how she found out about the website. Julia confessed that Erica informed her, and even though Ross was yelling at her at that moment, he didn't have time because he needed to call Erica and persuade her to delete the post. He called her quickly and asked her, with tears in his eyes, why she posted something like this. She told him that she bought drugs from the website and had a bad experience, landing her in the hospital. Ross told her that they didn't need to escalate things to this extent. If she had communicated with him, they could have reached an understanding and resolved the matter privately. Ross continued to try to convince her, promising to return her money, ban the seller from the website, and even provide her with any drugs she wanted from the website as a gift without payment. In the end, Erica was convinced, deleted the post, and Ross managed to calm himself down from this panic episode, reassuring himself that, in all likelihood, few people saw this post besides Erica's Facebook friends, who were already few in number and mostly considered it a joke. However, after this incident, significant problems arose between him and his girlfriend Julia, to the point where she gave Ross an ultimatum: either he closes the website or they part ways. Ross chose the website, and their relationship ended. This made Ross tense most of the time, especially now that only 2 people knew his secret, and his relationship with them was not in the best condition. At this point, Ross decided, as a precaution, to leave the country for a while. He decided to travel the world, visiting many countries like Australia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and several countries in East Asia, getting to know many people during this journey. But none of them knew that this nice, friendly young man was the owner of the most dangerous website in the world. Of course, with his travels, he had to keep working on the website all the time, anywhere. The hardest part is when he is in a public place or in a cafe. He has to sit in a corner or lower the laptop screen in a way that no one can see. No one should know what he is working on. The Silk Road website kept growing and expanding, becoming a global platform, no longer limited to America, because it spread everywhere. This, of course, multiplied Ross's wealth, which was now estimated at tens of millions, but at the same time, it put significant pressure on him. The website faced more and more problems every day, including programming issues, hacking and security problems, customer service issue support. So, Ross finally realized that there was no solution other than finding a way to hire people to work with him. But how could he trust these employees? In the end, he concluded that the best way was to hire people from the active users of the site, people with similar attitudes and views on openness and freedom. He managed to find about 10 individuals with different skills, ranging from programming to site management, customer support, and solving various problems they encountered. All these employees kept their identities unknown. No one knew the identity of the other. Each one worked on their assigned tasks. Ross paid them salaries, but at the same time, they believed in the work they were doing, and all of them were advocates of freedom, not convinced that those working on this site would change the world. The Silk Road website was no longer limited to selling drugs. It started offering hacking services, stolen Visa cards, forged identities and passports, counterfeit money, and even heavy weapons like missile launchers. It became a marketplace selling all imaginable prohibited items. Imagine it reaching a point where they sold human organs like kidneys, and only those selling these organs know how they obtained them. During this period, Ross got to know a person named Bright Jones, or this was his nickname on the site. This person would become his close friend and right-hand man in managing the website. Ross felt a sense of loneliness in this secret adventure because there was no one in his life he could tell about what he was doing. The only one who knew was Julia, and she was gone. So, having these digital friends around him was the only solace for him, with Freddie Jones being the closest person to him. One of their conversations revolved around Ross mentioning that the work they were doing on the Silk Road site categorized them as drug lords. The authorities like Escobar, El Chapo, and other heavyweights. Under Jones's guidance, Ross suggested giving himself a distinctive title, a title that could be attributed to more than one person. Even if the authorities managed to arrest Ross in the future, he could claim that this title represented a large group of people, so not all charges would be directed at him. The title they settled on was Dread Pirate Roberts. In reality, this title refers to a character in an old film, a pirate who instills fear in the hearts of his enemies. When the hero decided to retire, he passed the title to his successor. This concept was the same idea they had in mind. Ross will adopt this title and pass it to his successor in the future, or use it as a cover to divert law enforcement pursuits. Ross became known by this title in the Silk Road community, and his name became Dread Pirate Roberts. This name was how people identified the founder. Ross's empire continued to grow, and in the year 2013, 2 years after the site's launch, the number of users reached 1 million, with transactions exceeding $1 billion. As for Ross's wealth, it surpassed $100 million, especially since all his money was in Bitcoin, and the value of Bitcoin was skyrocketing. Now a quick break. This video is one of the ones I worked hard on, so I hope if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to hit the like button below because it really motivates me every time I see the number increase. For those of you who haven't subscribed and are enjoying the video, please subscribe, as I consistently upload such content on the channel. Keep following the story to the end because the upcoming events are intense. As the size of the Silk Road website grew, U.S. authorities noticed an increase in the quantity of postal parcels seized due to the presence of drugs inside them. The U.S. authorities were intercepting a significant number of these parcels. However, the majority still managed to pass through. Security agencies involved in the case, such as the FBI and DEA, responsible for drug enforcement, intensified their efforts. Despite the significant roles played by these major agencies, progress in the case was expected thanks to an Internal Revenue Service (IRS) employee. The IRS is the agency responsible for taxes and financial tracking in the United States. They are the ones holding the reins on the money in the country, for those unfamiliar with it. This agent, Gary, was very intelligent and had a belief that a person with less experience could outperform those with more experience if they thought differently. This made him genuinely surpass the FBI and DEA. Gary would be the first person to reveal the identity of Silk Road's founder. His task in the case was to try to trace the money passing through the website. However, because all transactions were in Bitcoin and couldn't be easily tracked, Gary decided to try and trace the mastermind, the founder of the website. But how would he do it if the FBI couldn't trace them? How would a tax agency agent be able to track him? Gary made him think about himself. Silk Road's website is in the dark web, so how did it spread? How did people find out about it? The founder couldn't openly share it with his family and friends, so it must have started on the internet. Gary went and searched on Google for the website's address, setting the search date to the beginning of 2011 when the site started. Gary wanted to find the first person who mentioned this site on the entire internet. Gary found a forum called Shumari, a forum specializing in discussions about magic mushrooms and similar substances. In this forum, there were posts by a user named Mark Altweed. He wrote in the post, "Hey guys, I visited a website called Silk Road, a site on the dark web that claims to allow buying and selling anything online discreetly. I'm thinking of buying from him, but I wanted to ask if anyone has heard of him and can recommend him, and then provide the website link." Of course, this post written by Ross was his way of marketing the site, as I mentioned before, and Agent Gary immediately caught on to it and knew that this was the founder of the site, because he was the first person to mention the site's address on the entire internet. True, this is not conclusive evidence that he is the founder, but it raises significant suspicions. So, Gary continued his search and started looking for posts written by this person. He found the same username in several forums and places where he was promoting and marketing the site in the same secretive way. Essentially, he was seeking people's opinions, but the identity of this person remained unknown. In the end, Gary got lucky when he found a post where this person was advertising for a technical expert in dealing with Bitcoin. In the post, he mentioned that he was looking for a professional developer to work in a startup company that handles Bitcoin transactions, seeking a programmer to manage buying and selling with Bitcoin. The problem was that in this post, he included an email address, and this email was under the real name of Ross Ulbricht at gmail.com. You can imagine the excitement that Agent Gary felt at that moment. He immediately went to Google and searched for Ross's name, and the first thing that came up was Ross's page on LinkedIn. On this page, Ross had written posts against the government and posts supporting absolute freedom and more. It was a thoughtful and coherent profile that matched someone who could establish a site like Silk Road. Afterward, Gary searched for him on YouTube and found that he had a channel where he shared similar content. The videos covered topics related to freedom, government, and similar subjects, with a considerable number of views. Gary thought to himself, I could be the first person to search for this individual and find the person responsible for the most dangerous website on the entire internet. Gary felt a sense of triumph at that moment. To add to this, he came across a question posted by a user named Ross Ulbricht on Stack Overflow, a programming-oriented website. The question was related to the Tor service, the technology that underlies the dark web. Ross was looking for a skilled developer to work for a startup company involved in Bitcoin transactions. The catch was that the email address provided in the post was Ross Ulbricht's actual Gmail address. Gary couldn't believe his luck. He immediately went to Google and searched for Ross's name. The first result was Ross's LinkedIn profile, which showcased posts against the government and in favor of absolute freedom. It seemed perfectly aligned with someone who could create a site like Silk Road. He continued his enthusiastic journey and went to the Internal Revenue Service (IRS) office the next day. When he shared what he had found with his colleagues, they couldn't believe it. They laughed and joked, asking if he was hallucinating. Gary retorted confidently, telling them to wait and see the evidence he would present to the FBI. Unknown to Gary, at the same time, FBI investigators were making significant progress in the case. They managed to trace the IP address of the server hosting Silk Road. This IP address, a crucial piece of information, would help them locate the server and everything associated with it. However, tracking this address was an incredibly challenging task due to the encryption provided by Tor technology, making it nearly impossible to trace anyone on the dark web. The stage was set for a dramatic turn in the Silk Road investigation, with both Gary and the FBI closing in on the elusive figure behind the notorious website. The next chapters of the story promised even more twists and revelations. So how did the FBI manage to track the IP address of the server hosting the Silk Road website? There are theories suggesting that the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, was responsible for obtaining this information, most likely through their comprehensive surveillance program applied to American citizens, which explicitly contradicts the provisions of the U.S. Constitution, guaranteeing the privacy and freedom of its citizens. Those familiar with Edward Snowden and the leaks he revealed about the NSA are aware of the serious overreach of this agency. The issue of Edward Snowden and the leaks about the NSA is significant and could be the subject of a separate video. In any case, Snowden himself stated that the NSA had a direct hand in the investigations surrounding the Silk Road website, claiming they were the ones who could access server information and its address through their illegal comprehensive surveillance program. U.S. authorities officially claimed that they obtained the IP address of the server through vulnerabilities in Silk Road's programming codes. However, whether this claim is true or not is uncertain. It's possible because, as mentioned, the website had many issues, as it was designed by Ross himself, who wasn't an expert in the field. Still, it seems illogical that such a significant mistake would occur, exposing the IP address. If the address was exposed, why didn't they discover it quickly? Why did it take them so much time to address this issue? How they obtained the IP address was a subject of various theories. In summary, the FBI identified the server's address, knew its location in Iceland, and contacted Icelandic authorities. They managed to fully penetrate the server. Although they didn't disclose this, they continued covertly monitoring the server, gaining access to all its data and monitoring all activities taking place on it. They could track the entry and exit of the admin, including Ross, observing his every move, even noting the last login operation he performed. Despite having all this data, they couldn't pinpoint a specific individual in the large city of San Francisco, where there are hundreds of thousands of people. This is where our protagonist, Gary, the IRS agent, entered the investigation. Gary provided the FBI with information about the user or username known as Altoid, who was the first person to mention the Silk Road website on the internet. He also informed them about the advertisement that was posted and the email associated with the name Ross Ulbricht. The FBI immediately took action and started tracking this person. The shock came when they discovered that Ross lived in San Francisco, just a few buildings away from the internet cafe where Redbeard Roberts, Ross, was tracked entering. Finally, they were certain that Ross Ulbricht was their sought-after target. The shock was that they hadn't imagined their target would be an ordinary person like Ross. They had expected a dangerous hacker, a gang leader, or someone significant. However, they were confronted with an entirely ordinary young man. The FBI now knew their target, Ross, and all that remained was for them to assemble an arrest team and apprehend him. No mistakes could be made. They had to catch Ross with his laptop open. Why? Because all the evidence was on the laptop. If, for instance, they attacked Ross and he became aware of them, his first reaction would likely be to close the laptop. Once closed, all the data on it would be encrypted, and they wouldn't be able to access it unless he opened the laptop himself. An unlikely scenario. So, they needed to catch him red-handed with the laptop open and the website in front of him. This was the only way to convict him fully and prove the charges against him. To obtain valuable data, such as information about his collaborators and major traders on the site, they had to ensure that, at the moment of arrest, there was no chance for him to close the laptop. They had to choose the attack moment carefully. Indeed, this moment came on October 1st, 2013. Ross woke up that day and, finding the cafe overcrowded, decided to go to the San Francisco Public Library. There, he found a secluded spot away from people, a place where he could see his laptop screen. He opened the laptop and logged into the Silk Road admin account. Unbeknownst to Ross, the library was filled with undercover FBI agents. When the agents saw the opportunity, they struck. Ross didn't anticipate that they were targeting him, and two FBI agents, a man and a woman, posed as a couple engaged in an argument. This was a diversion tactic to distract his attention. So, the two individuals were creating a commotion in the library, raising their voices at each other in front of everyone. The clever part was that they positioned themselves behind Ross, who was busy working on his laptop. Suddenly, he heard the shouting and commotion behind him, and in a moment of distraction, he turned his head away from the laptop to see what was happening. At that moment, a second agent, quietly and swiftly approached him from behind, seized the laptop and pulled it away while it was still open. Ross was shocked and attempted to grab the laptop, but he was too late to comprehend what was happening. FBI agents surrounded him from all sides, making arrests. Indeed, all the evidence was on the laptop, containing a complete daily log, where Ross detailed the administration of the website and listed all the daily tasks he performed. Additionally, thousands of messages and conversations between him and the people and employees assisting in running the site were discovered, a comprehensive set of incriminating evidence. After the arrest, the story spread everywhere about the seemingly ordinary guy who, in secrecy, managed the Silk Road, the world's most dangerous drug website. Ross's family was so shocked that they initially couldn't believe the situation. They firmly believed their son was framed, and it was impossible for him to be the person running such a site. Even after they accepted that he indeed created the website, they maintained that he was not the one managing or responsible for it. They believed there must be a much larger organization behind the scenes. The arrest of Ross and the shutdown of Silk Road were significant events. The FBI, after examining Ross's laptop data, found things that were shocking to the point of being almost unimaginable. Let me tell you about one of these things. Get ready, because this part is crazier than science fiction and action movies. The FBI discovered that there were two agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, who were corrupt, each working independently. Secondly, they abused their positions to steal money from Ross and converted these funds into their private Bitcoin wallets. How did this happen? Let me tell you the story. Focus with me. After the FBI examined Ross's laptop, they got all the previous conversations and discovered that, in one of these conversations, Ross was communicating with an agent from the Drug Enforcement Administration. This agent's name was Carl, Agent Carl Force. He logged into the Silk Road website under the name Knob. That was his username, and he began communicating with Ross. Of course, he knew Ross by the name of Dread Pirate Roberts. Nobi told Ross that he knows a corrupt agent in the Drug Enforcement Administration who could send them information about the Silk Road investigation in exchange for money. Of course, Knob, or Carl Force, meant himself, but what Ross said was that he is the corrupt agent. Ross agreed to the deal, and over the following months, Carl Force continued to send information about the case to Ross and received money for it. They both didn't know each other's identities, but during the period they worked together, Ross paid Carl Force over $750,000. All these payments were made in Bitcoin. Ross remained constantly informed about the progress of the case, receiving updates in real time. So now we know the corrupt agent number one, Carl Force. Now let's put Carl Force aside and introduce a new character into the story, a man named Curtis. This man was one of the admins that Ross appointed to help him manage the site. Curtis was an admin and also a drug user. One day, after Curtis received a new shipment of cocaine ordered from the site, he was surprised to find the police and drug enforcement forces raiding his house, arresting him on the spot. They had been tracking the sudden arrival of this package. Curtis disappeared. Ross wondered, where did he go? Why did he suddenly vanish? Ross had no idea that Curtis had been arrested. Later, Ross noticed that around $350,000 had disappeared from the Silk Road account. This meant that the site had an escrow account where they held the funds until transactions were completed. When a customer bought something from the site, the money wasn't immediately transferred to the seller, retained the funds in the account. The escrow, after ensuring that the order was completed without issues, would then transfer the money to the seller and take their commission. Curtis usually had the authority to access the account, and Ross trusted him. Now, with Curtis gone, Ross assumed that Curtis had betrayed him and stolen the money, disappearing. In reality, Curtis was not the one who stole the money. It was a corrupt DEA agent named Sean Bridges. He was the second corrupt agent, and he was among the forces that arrested Curtis. After Curtis was apprehended, Bridges was the first to seize the laptop, using it as evidence. However, discreetly, he accessed Curtis's account on the Silk Road site and, using his admin privileges, transferred the bitcoins from the site's account to his personal Bitcoin wallet. Bitcoin transactions are virtually untraceable, so he felt secure that no one would discover his actions. Now, we have two corrupt agents in the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, each working independently, exploiting their positions to steal hundreds of thousands for personal gain. Ross, on the other side, felt the theft by the admin and was extremely frustrated. So he decided to hire someone to track down Curtis, beat him, and force him to return the money. However, after consulting with his right-hand man, Variety Jones, he convinced him to hire someone to kill Curtis. Jones argued that it needed to be a strong message to everyone that no one could cross him. Ross was persuaded and posted a message among his close associates, stating that if anyone knew a killer who could track down Curtis and kill him, they should contact him. One of the people who saw the message was Knob, or the first corrupt agent, Carl Force. Carl, when he saw an opportunity. Knowing that he had been arrested but was not a traitor or a thief as Ross believed, he contacted Ross and offered to help. He claimed to know professionals who could carry out the operation for $80,000. Ross agreed, but he wanted proof. He wanted a photo. Carl then went to Curtis, who was in custody, and forced him to pose as dead. They took a picture to make it look like a shot of a corpse. Of course, Curtis was not really dead. The image was fake. After this staged scenario, Carl Force contacted Ross again, providing details confirming Curtis's identity and asserting that he was the treacherous admin. He then sent the fake photo of Curtis supposedly dead. Ross was convinced and transferred the agreed-upon amount $80,000 to Carl Force. Imagine, Ross actually hired hitmen to get rid of the admin. The traitor believed it, as if Ross had become accustomed to hiring killers to eliminate his targets. Another incident happened, but we won't go into details as it would be lengthy. In essence, Ross asked a hitman to kill 5 people. This story is quite bizarre, but in the end, Ross was not charged with the murder of the 5 individuals. I won't go into details because I might make a separate video about this incident, as it's quite long, depending on your interaction with this video. If you want to see it, like, comment, and share, and I will make a video about it. In any case, all these matters, stories, and characters were known through the data and conversations found on the laptop. The laptop that served as crucial evidence in this case. It was a wise move by the FBI to apprehend Ross with the laptop still open. The trial of Ross began in February 2014 and lasted for about a year. During the trial, Ross's lawyers attempted to defend him by presenting a story that he initially created the website as a social experiment, but sold it when things got out of control. They argued that the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts belonged to multiple individuals, and the title was passed from Ross to the person who bought the site from him. However, this narrative did not convince the court, as the conversations between Ross and his first lieutenant, Curtis Green, were explicitly stating that they chose the name to avoid associating all charges with Ross. Despite the presence of evidence, Ross's defense argued that the FBI planted the evidence on his laptop to frame him. Interestingly, this argument mirrored the statements made by his parents, who insisted that their son was not the mastermind and continued to conduct campaigns and fundraising efforts to support his case to this day. In the end, the evidence against Ross was very strong, and defenses like the one he attempted were ineffective. Ross tried at one point to appeal to the judge with a letter, asking for a lenient sentence. He wrote that he acknowledges his mistakes, knows he should face years in the prime of his life, but pleaded for a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, hoping to have the motivation to stay healthy for a chance at a better life before facing his maker. The judge responded decisively in court, stating that Ross was the captain of the ship and the primary responsible for millions of drug transactions. The judge emphasized that being educated doesn't make one privileged, and Ross, as the leader of a criminal organization, would be held accountable. In the end, Ross was tried as a drug kingpin, placed on the same level as notorious figures like Escobar and Chapo. The jury found him guilty, and the judge sentenced him to 2 life sentences plus 40 years without the possibility of parole. This means he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Some may wonder why the sentences are life sentences. The idea is that Ross faced multiple charges, each with its sentence. For example, the first charge resulted in a life sentence, the second in 40 years, and the third in another life sentence. This stacking of sentences ensures that even if he were to be acquitted of one charge in the future, he would still have the remaining convictions. Some found the sentences excessively harsh, arguing that Ross should have been treated differently than drug lords, but the judge's decision stands. What are your thoughts on this judgment? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments. Thank you for following along. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. See you in the next video. Goodbye.